Welcome to Goldfish on Games and Cover Disc Face Off, where we're sliding towards the end of the year, and three magazines think they have what it takes to send 1993 off in style. Joining us today are See You Amiga, Amiga Action and Amiga Power. Fight! And let's start with Amiga Power, who have given us two discs to unwrap, and that has two demos, a PD title, and something special. And that is being Nipper vs. the Cats, a special game made by Graph Gold in conjunction with Amiga Power and HMV. For those not in the know, HMV was, and still barely is, a high street entertainment store that was mostly about music, being that the letters stood for His Master's Voice, but they were also known to stock movies and games. These days, if you can even find a HMV, it's mostly about entertainment merchandise, with it still carrying a small selection of movies and music. The game is completely custom, as it has you playing as Nipper, a dog that looks similar to the dog from the logo. And the only real goal of this is to earn the best score in the time given. You have no lives, but if you get hit by one of the cats, you will get stunned for a short while. But you can take them out by jumping on them and then kicking them while they're frozen, and that will make it rain pickups. You can also get some extra points by going to the entrance to the HMV store. Now this has been their fancy new one that they had just opened up that was dedicated to gaming, and they called it Level 1. And it's here you can bank those points to get a little bit of a bonus. There's also this entire underground area for you to explore as well. Now overall, this is a fun if slightly slow moving game, if a little basic. But it does contain something else, as when you reach the high score table, you will get a code, which you could then send into Amiga Power and be in with the chance of winning money to spend at level 1. So not only is this a custom game, but it's also a custom competition, which I think is quite neat really. Our first demo of the episode is for Wiz and Liz, a game I've heard about but not really played, so this should be interesting. And right away, this seems to be a relatively complete demo, as you can switch between Wiz and Liz, and there seems to be the main hub area of the game as well. But it really starts to open up once you jump through a few of the doors, as you'll find yourself on a level proper. The goal? Well, it's to collect the bunnies that are walking around, some of which will release a letter. You'll need to use those letters to complete the word at the top of the screen. When you manage that, well then it will give you a set number of bunnies for you to collect. Manage that and then it will give you another word, so you'll have to repeat the process. But I have to say, for playing what looks like a couple of older people, they really do move fast and have quite the decent jump. But eventually it will finish and you'll get back to the hub world. Now when you make it back to your home, there seems to be something extra with collecting fruit and veg and then putting them in the pot. And it talks about giving you a spell, but I wasn't quite sure what all that was about. The magazine seemed a little bit light on information. But it does just mean you can get back into the game and go on and try another level. And you can keep doing this until the time limit becomes a bit too harsh and you'll probably end up losing some lives. So this is actually quite a sizable demo, and it does look quite interesting enough that I might have to go check it out for real. And our final demo for the magazine is Cyberpunks, a multi-level demo from Core Design, which is a top-down multi-directional shooter in the vein of Alien Breed, but here we get to control 3 characters at once: R, G and B. It has a few options for controlling how they aim, so either locked or the last direction they were in, and also while you walk around you will pick up items that will either get used right away, or will end up in the currently selected punk's inventory, and you can freely switch between them to either fill them up or use the items. The main goal from what I've managed to work out is that you have to collect keys to open up doors. That will let you get more keys to open more doors, and that eventually will let you get to an elevator that will take you to the next level. It's an interesting game, even if the time limit feels quite punishing. More so for a first attempt, when you have absolutely no idea where you're going or what you're doing, but it does seem like an interesting game, and one I might have to come back to. And the final game for Amiga Power is a PD title, and it's Space Invasion. Yep, it's another clone of Space Invaders. Even the disc says, yes, again. And I think we might have seen this one before, or at least some games by the same developer, as it feels very familiar. And it's mostly the classic game of Space Invaders that we all know and love, just without the shields. And that the invaders will throw a massive amount of firepower your way. So you really need to learn how to dodge. It's fine enough for what it is, but it's definitely not one that I'll return to. So let's move on to the next magazine, which is Amiga Action. That for a second year running has given us a special Christmas edition, and seeing it had a better selection than its December one, I decided to go with it. And across 3 discs we have 4 demos. And let's roll out to the deep end with Bob's Bad Day. A 5-level demo of a game that was already out according to the title screen. And it's one that I think could be best described as a sort of collect-em-up puzzle game, as you have to rotate the whole world to move Bob around and collect the coins. Once all of them have been gotten, you can then head to the exit. The screen before each level helpfully points out where both Bob and the exit will be. It's an interesting game, but I think it might be a little bit too twitchy with the movement, as I found it way too easy to have Bob flying across the screen, where all I wanted was a much slower movement from him. You do have this very limited jump that can help in some limited situations, but most of the time it's the world that you'll have to move. It's an interesting demo, as there are quite a few levels and they do add things as you go, such as icons that change the direction of the gravity, and things that can hurt our poor Bob. But that time limit, it's a bit of a pain. The second demo massively jumps genre as it's Campaign 2, a military simulator. Now we've seen the previous entry in this series, but I don't remember it all that well. So I'm not going to be able to point out all the real differences between this and the previous one. And this initial screen looks very familiar to the demo that I played before. Apart from maybe the helicopters, I don't think it had helicopters before. And you can still select the units and then give them orders. Or you can take over the unit and then control them directly. Now the magazine really didn't give all that much detail on how to play the game. I've seen them give more information in a caption to an image than they gave to this game. And I get the feeling some of that is going to come across in this gameplay footage, as I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, as I had tanks and helicopters just going around in circles and then getting shot down. And I would have thought they would have spotted the enemy and then tried to attack them, but I don't think they did. But I did manage to get a tank to drive around, and I managed to shoot at a few things. I assume they were the enemy. This is one of those serious games where you really have to dig into the manual, or at least have a very good tutorial to go over the basics. And it's really not the sort of demo that I would expect from Amiga Action. Where what we get next is very much up their alley, as it's a special demo for Charlie Chimp 2. As it's Charlie the Christmas Chimp. And just look at that picture. Doesn't it convey the holiday spirit? As Charlie is there, ready to mess us up with a baseball bat, while dressed as Santa Claus. Let's go. Overall, it doesn't feel like much has changed since we played the last Charlie Chimp game. As you have to walk over the squares to change their colour, and once you've done that to all of them, you get to do it again a few more times, just for good measure, all while trying to avoid or hitting the large baddies that will try to kill you if you barely brush up against them. But you do have a rope that you can use to get to some of those more difficult squares, but this is hampered by some twitchy controls. As you'll need to make sure that you travel over the square fully to make it trigger, which sometimes might mean you have to go off it to go back onto it again. It's not a bad game. I was just hoping they might have actually improved some of the control issues, as they were there in the original. But being a relatively cheap shareware title, I get the feeling that this is really just more levels. But I did spot a boss, which was a massive football boot. This might be new, but I don't know the original game well enough to bear to tell you either way. And of course, on top of all of this, there's our good old favourite, timer. Let's go. But in this one, if you run out of time, it's not just a simple game over. Instead, the level goes black and white, and a demon will show up to throw spears at you. And depending on where it is, it might make it almost impossible to finish the level. This is one of those, if you enjoyed the first game, then you'll definitely enjoy the special demo and the second title. And our last demo for the magazine is Jack the Ripper. And before we move on, how bad does this title screen look? I can barely make out the name. Jack Ike Rippers? Now, if you don't recall this title, well, there's a good reason for that. This was a unreleased game. It's been a while since we've seen one of those. Now, there was a version that came out for MS-DOS, but that got released a few years later, so we can't even blame the bad title screen on it being a DOS port. The ugliness of the title screen is continued in-game, and I don't like to rag on a game, but this was 1993. We already had Monkey Island, Cruise for a Corpse and Goblins. This looks on par with the PD game, Fractal Goblins. And with that rant out of the way, let's continue into this murder mystery game. You'll have to go around talking to people, investigating the scenes of the crime, all while taking notes of what you find. Now this will go into your notebook, where you'll have to name everything that you want to remember later, and you'll have to travel to other locations to talk to more people, all within a very limited time frame, as you only have one in-game day to solve the mystery. Oh, and obviously there has to be a score system which will penalise you very quickly if you go even a millimetre off script. Now, I'm not sure the gameplay holds up, as after taking all the notes you can then try and join them together to work out who the murderer was, which turns out to be the very man that the police constable at the very start told you it was. So you're some master detective there. I can see why they decided not to release this one in the end. They also had one extra on this disc, and that was for Graham Gooch's Cricket, and acts like a data disc to set up some important match that they wanted to show off. But we've got so much content to look at, and I know so little of cricket that I think we're just going to move on instead. We end the episode with See You Amiga, that across 2 discs gave us 2 complete art packages and 2 demos. And let's get stuck into those art programs, with Spectra Color being the first. This is an art package designed specifically for working with the Amiga's ham modes, which means it can draw and display a huge number of colours, as ham allowed the Amiga to bypass the typical colour limits by using colour offsets for each pixel. This was great for static images, but not so good for anything that needed to be drawn quickly, which is why it wasn't used too often in games. The basics of the program look very similar to Deluxe Paint, but there's a lot more tools hidden away in the background, like being able to draw with a shadow, or blending with the foreground and background layers. This all looks very detailed, and there's even options for making animations. It's just a shame there aren't any samples to show this all off, so you're going to have to make do with me stumbling through the various options and making a right pig's ear of this image. If you didn't have Deluxe Paint, I could see this being really good. The second art package is for Aegis Animator, a sort of proto-flash animation system, as this provided animation lovely shows off. You can create polygons and apply colour animations, or even apply tweens to move it around the screen. Or you can go and load in the assets for the intro animation with its backgrounds and its planes. But this is very hungry for RAM, so if you don't have much, then you're going to be very limited, and it might just crash on you. This is one of those packages that you could be messing around with for hours trying to work it all out, as it's very detailed, and I can imagine there were quite a few animations for the Amiga that would have been made with this. But really, you're here for the games, aren't you? Yeah, you can admit it to me. And first up might be possibly the least favourite in the trilogy, as it's Turrican 3. Which is a very nice looking game, but one that moved away from what a lot of people liked about the first 2 titles, being large, semi-open levels for you to explore. Where now, it's mostly linear and you just have to move from left to right. This is actually the 4th level in the game, and really shows off what I'm talking about. But to try and make up for that, they have introduced some new movement tech, as gone is the laser whip, and in its place is a regular whip that lets you swing across areas. It's a little slow to trigger, and releasing can be a bit awkward as you have to hold the button down, but it works well enough and it's a fun addition to the game, even if it's not really needed for the demo. The weapon system also got a bit of a change as well, as there doesn't seem to be much in the way of levels to them anymore. You just collect the one that you think fits best for the moment, including the new one that bounces along the ground, or the missiles that are an addition to your regular guns. I think this is a nice looking game that moves quite well, and there's some really nice looking water effects and some larger baddies later on in the level. And you get a chance to go for a swim. This does feel a bit more like a console game, which I guess shouldn't be all that surprising, seeing that this is basically a port of the Mega Drive title. And there's a whole history that goes along with everything that happened with this game, which we do not have time for. So I did enjoy this demo, even if it does seem to just randomly end on a black screen. But that just leaves us more time for the big demo of the month. It's Settlers. which gives us a relatively complete looking menu, even if a few of the options have been disabled or made a little bit more limited. But surprisingly, you can actually select a 2-player game, even if the size and seed for the map is locked, so you will get the same one every single time. But this is Settlers, so every game will be a little bit different. The game, if you don't know it already, is about building. Not just simple buildings, but the roads that connect to them, then the chains that will make them all work. Because if you want to build anything, you'll need wood. To get wood, you'll need trees. So you'll want to place a woodcutter. But they will quickly run out, so you'll then want to place a forester, who will grow more. And then you'll need a sawmill, which requires some more area, to turn those trees into planks. There are many such chains like this in the game, all in the aid of growth and expansion. As you'll need to get more area to build more stuff, which will mean you'll need to get knights to then protect your land, and then eventually you'll have to remove the other players from the map if you want to win. This demo can be against a single one or against a number of them, and normally you'd be able to set their aggression and their speed and everything, but here it's all locked down. This is such a charming and fun game. If not the fastest one, everything takes time. Everything has to be transported around the map. It's something you can play and plan and enjoy at your own pace. And I did that so much with this demo. I've been a huge fan of the series ever since a mate gave me a copy of this disc. To the extent that I've done a number of videos on the games in this series. So if you want to find out how complex the chains and these games get, you should go check those out. And with that, we have the end of a seriously good month with a bunch of custom demos. But where do we land on the rankings? In last place, I'm going to say Amiga Action. Jack the Ripper was the worst thing we played. But Bob's Bad Day was good fun. In second place, I'm going to have to give it to Amiga Power. Now I can already hear the comments being typed. It had a great collection of demos and new games. But I have to give first place to CU Amiga. It introduced me to the Settlers, and that demo I played more than the rest of these combined, multiplied by 100. And for that reason alone, it has to win. If you disagree with me, and I can imagine there'll be a few of you, let me know in the comments. And until next time, I was the Goldfish. That was the end of 2023, and I wish you all a great holiday and happy new year. And this was Goldfish on Games. Thanks for watching. Seriously, thank you for watching. I really enjoy making these videos. And it's amazing that you've made it this far. And if you want to keep going, then there'll be 2 more videos on the screen that you could check out. But other than that, you lot are awesome, and I hope to see you again soon.